The Canucks have traded for Nikita Zadorov. Our set looks so bare because we just cleaned up. We left the studio. Harmon left the studio. I was still in the office. We had a bunch of stuff going on. And as if they were watching the show and waiting for us to finish up, the Vancouver Canucks trade for Nikita Zadorov, acquiring a third, or excuse me, giving up a third and fifth round pick to acquire the 6'6", nearly 250-pound defenseman from the Calgary Flames.
It's crazy. I mean, earlier today, I had my phone go off and it was a notification from the score, and I had this weird spidey sense feeling where I don't like to get caught off guard in inconvenient situations when the Canucks make a trade. And I'm like, I really hope they didn't trade for Zadorov. And it wasn't that. It was some other notification. I think it was Corey Perry making a statement. And then sure enough, a few hours later, the actual another notification pops in that they've traded for Zadorov. So funny how timing works that way. Yeah, I mean, honestly, he cost less than I thought. A third and a fifth round pick is a reasonable price to pay for the Vancouver Canucks. He's going to be a significant upgrade. I would describe him as a number 4/5 type defenseman. He's somebody that can play on your second pair. If you have a loaded blue line, is probably a third pair piece like he was in Calgary. Zadorov's a really interesting player because, as you alluded to, he's massive, he's physical, but he also skates really well for his size. So sometimes you'll see him carrying the puck, whether it's in transition or in the offensive zone, and he'll show more pop than you'd expect, right? Because a lot of times when a defenseman is that big and that physical, people immediately go, oh, he's got to be a big lumbering shutdown guy that can't really move. But this guy has legit offensive touch. He's also driven positive defensive metrics. He is prone to the quote unquote big mistake sometimes. So whether it's turnovers or an occasional defensive miscue in terms of his positioning. So that's a reason why in some of his previous stops, he hasn't been leaned on as a full-time top four defenseman. But for this blue line, he's going to be a legit upgrade. And the other angle that I find interesting about this is that when Soucy comes back, the Canucks will now have Hughes, Zadorov, Cole, and Soucy. So now one of those lefties will presumably move to the right side, which I find interesting because in training camp, the coaching staff seemed reluctant to shift whether it was Cole or Soucy, one of those lefties, to the right side. They seem to have a preference of lefty-righty pairs. And I think this shows to me as well that at least one component of it has to be that the coaching staff must be comfortable that once Soucy returns, that you can shift one of those guys to the right side, because Zadorov can also play the right side. He's a left shot, but he's got experience there. So does Cole. So does Soucy. So at least you have multiple options in terms of even when Soucy returns and you've got all four lefties healthy, that it's not just you're leaning on one guy as, okay, this is our one bet to then shift over to the right side and hopefully he can stick. You've got multiple options, which allows you to be flexible in your combinations and the different experiments you run. But in the interim, with how heavy the workload was on Hughes, Hronek, Cole, Myers, I think this is huge.
A third and a fifth. People in the YouTube live chat are saying, how did the Canucks pay that little for Nikita Zadorov? All the things we were hearing from the insiders and, everything about the trade being driven up and the conversations you and I were having on this show. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new. A lot of new people in the show right now. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video. The conversations you and I had been having, Harmon, were if you're Calgary, you're not going to make a trade unless it's a sure win for you, right? You're a new GM. Why are you making this trade unless it's a sure win for you? I don't think this is a win for the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I think devil's advocate would say that you could look at Luke Schenn, for instance, who went for a third round pick last trade deadline. And considering Schenn was playing in a top four role, could that be, a fair trade comparable for Zadorov? But certainly when people were citing that before this trade happened, I thought that was on the lower end. I figured that if you had to pull the trigger on this type of trade this far in advance of the deadline, I thought the cost might be somewhere in the neighborhood of a second round pick, especially because in previous trade deadlines, sometimes for these big defensemen, the price can be really high. I mean, Jeremy Lauzon, for instance, went for, I believe, a second round pick from Seattle to Nashville. So yeah, a third round pick and a fifth that came in a bit below what I anticipated, especially being this far in advance of the trade deadline.
The Canucks blue line now. A week ago, we were talking about Mark Friedman, Noah Juulsen, Akito Hirose all being in the lineup at the same time. Two of those guys being in the lineup at the same time. Right now, you're looking at a first pairing of Quinn Hughes, Filip Hronek, for our purposes, Ian Cole, Nikita Zadorov. Zadorov's played 4 games on the right side for Calgary is what I saw on Twitter. No clue if that's true. So I'll parrot it on the show. Cole, Zadorov is your second pair. You've got Myers, and then you've got one of a guy like Friedman, Irwin, Juulsen, whoever is going to be there until Carson Soucy gets healthy. Not to mention Ethan Bear. Harman, my question for you, do the Canucks still sign Ethan Bear even with this acquisition of Nikita Zadorov?
It's a really good question. I haven't had a chance to really think about that because the trade just happened, and I'm mapping out all these different possibilities. One thing I will say is when you were sort of mentioning Cole and Zadorov together, I almost wonder if until the Canucks get another lefty back, if coaching staff might just keep Zadorov on the left side. And I think in the short term, what I'm looking forward to is hopefully this taking some of the burden off of Tyler Myers, who his minutes were really starting to creep up. I want to pull it up.
As you pull that up, it's worth mentioning that Hughes and Hronek's minutes were also going up very, very high, and you were starting to see a lot of the blemishes with this blue line in the absence of Carson Soucy. And I know the conversation you and I have had is, well, Carson Soucy was out at the start of the year, and that's the thing. The difference between the start of the year and how fresh all of your guys are compared to this point in the season, it's very different. Even though it doesn't seem like it's that long ago, it's different. And that's why you're starting to see some of these blemishes coming through on the Canucks blue line. They needed an upgrade. They went and got it. What were you going to say there?
Yeah, so Myers, for instance, last game logged 23 minutes, which is too much considering where he's at in his stage of his career. And we've seen that when Myers is able to play a little bit less, you're able to shelter him a little bit more. You're able to get the calm, poised, and most effective version of Tyler Myers. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, Ian Cole has been doing a lot of heavy lifting in the non-Hughes and Hronek minutes. I'm looking forward to him having a little bit more support because Cole's also 34. And the one thing you always wonder about with veteran defensemen is I think about Mark Giordano in Toronto, for example. And of course, Giordano was 39 last year, so 5 years older than Cole. So that's, of course, a big difference. But Giordano, because of Toronto's injuries, held down a top 4 role, was playing tougher minutes, was great through the regular season. But then in the playoffs, you saw that he completely ran out of gas because he was leaned on so heavily in the regular season to where in the playoffs, you just couldn't even lean on him in a third pair role. He was just too fatigued. The workload was catching up to him. So I think it will really help Cole as well, and hopefully being able to manage his minutes and his matchups as well.
Rick Dhaliwal is reporting that the Canucks are still interested in Ethan Bear after this trade. So, and that makes sense too, because you still need, I think, an upgrade on that right side. And now that they've traded for Zadorov here, you got to look at, okay, how can we upgrade without giving up too many more assets? And as we all know, Ethan Bear is an unrestricted free agent defenseman. So the more depth you can have on the back end, that would be a bonus for this team going forward.
Excellent addition, Grady. Thank you for chiming in. Sorry, we kind of people in the chat were pointing out that you had your video on and he leaned into the mic and neither of us saw it. And
Cut me off, boys.
Harman, the question I have for you when it comes to Zadorov and his play style, who's the best partner for him? And alternatively, people in the chat are putting out the Chaos Giraffe and the Chaos Rhino as a pairing. Call it the zoo pairing, if you will. Who's the best partner for Nikita Zadorov on this Canucks team? And also, is he a primary puck mover or is he better as kind of that secondary guy who's kind of hanging back a bit and playing defense?
He's better. He's better as secondary. He's not really a primary puck mover, even though in transition he can sometimes skate it out. The zone exits are sometimes when you'll see him make a questionable decision. I'm trying to think who he's going to fit best with a calm presence. So if anything, I think Cole would be a great fit But it just comes down to how quickly do you want Zadorov playing on the right side as opposed to the left side, because with Zadorov playing more of an aggressive, high event style, he's probably going to work best with somebody who plays more of a low key, steady, can clean up the mistakes type of defenseman. And the Canucks don't really have that piece right now, unless they want to separate Hughes from Hronik from Hughes, which I don't think you want to do considering how well those guys have played together as a pairing. So stylistically, the best fit is probably Cole, so long as you're comfortable moving Zadorov to the right side, which I don't know how comfortable the coaching staff will be doing that right away.
Canucks are facing the Vegas Golden Knights tonight. A lot of people in the chat asking, we don't anticipate that he's going to be in the lineup tonight. That's just not how life works in the National Hockey League. This guy just found out he's traded. He's not going to be in the lineup tonight.
He's not going to be, per Rick Dollywall.
There you go, Dollywall. Beautiful.
Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah. So he is not going to be in the lineup tonight. We anticipate he'll be in for the Vancouver Canucks next game. If you want a bit of a game preview, just to plug our show, because we have over 500 listeners right now, live viewers on the YouTube live show, the most we've any had by a very wide margin. We had a really good episode earlier today. That'll be out on your favorite podcast. Is it out yet, Grady?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
We should note, though, the next game is against the Calgary Flames in Calgary.
Excellent.
So Zadorov probably doesn't have to, well, he'll travel to Vancouver, I'm sure, to get acclimated with the team, but then
that'd be really funny if he did the actual switch dressing rooms. He like comes from his house in Calgary and just comes over there. Okay, $3.75 million is the cap hit here on his 2-year deal. He's in the final year of it. Will be a free agent on July 1st. I'm just looking at the Canucks cap friendly page. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of their current defensemen on the roster. Now, granted, that includes Matt Irwin and it includes Mark Friedman. Those guys are all going to be UFAs at the end of this year. Do you think the Canucks are going to be in a position to re-sign Nikita Zadorov in free agency? And I know it's probably too soon to start speculating that, but what's your gut feeling?
It's going to depend on the fit, because Zadorov, as you alluded to, the type of contract that he's going to demand, he's going to be paid close to the market value of a legit top 4 defenseman. So you have to be confident that he is that, rather than just, for instance, in Calgary, he was more of a third pair defenseman. So you have to figure out, is this a guy that can hang in a second pair role on a good team? And that's something that you'll just have to wait and see how it fits. It's one of those contracts that you're going to have to be sure about before you extend. You want to see how the fit works before you pull the trigger, I would think. And one of the other things to keep in mind is, I like the fit of Zadorov overall. I think he's going to be a significant upgrade. One thing that the team as a whole is going to have to be mindful of is that this Canucks blue line now has a lot of defensemen that take a high volume of penalties. So I'd pulled this up a couple of weeks ago, looking at, since the 2021 season, which NHL defensemen put their team shorthanded most often. So this is looking at penalty differential. How many penalties do you take compared to how many you draw? So Ian Cole has, in that sample, the worst penalty differential in the NHL. Tyler Myers is number 2. Nikita Zadorov is 6th worst. And Carson Soucy is 9th. So you've got 4 of the bottom 10 defensemen in terms of their penalty differential since 2020, all in the Canucks' blue line. That means the forwards are going to have to be especially disciplined about not taking those offensive zone penalties that we saw against Seattle, for instance, because this is a blue line that will probably, if history continues to repeat itself, will be in a shorthanded positions often. And considering that I'm still not feeling totally confident in the Canucks' penalty kill, despite it clearly improving from last season, you don't want to be testing that too often. So that's something that team-wide, for the forwards, is discipline. That needs to be something that you really have to be mindful of.
Close to 600 live viewers. Oh, over 600 now. We just crossed 600 as I said that. This is crazy, folks. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in here. I want to get to the chat as much as I can because people have a lot of good points. Someone asked, and there's a lot of new people joining us, so I should refresh. Someone asked what the Canucks gave up. Let's shift the conversation there, Harman, because the Canucks give up a 5th-round pick in the 2024 NHL entry draft, the one they acquired from Chicago, and a 3rd-round pick in 2026. My question to you, and this is a question I would ask Chris Faber because he probably knows about the 2026 draft class, or he would have if he was still on this show. The 2026 draft class, it's a 3rd-round pick in 2026. Just as a general rule of thumb, do you kind of like that they pushed this down the road a little bit and they didn't give up a 3rd-round pick in a more recent draft?
Absolutely. Especially because the team's window is over these next few years before. You have to always keep in mind, it's not just what players you have on your roster, but you have to look at what's your window based off the actual contracts on your books. And so you're looking at the Canucks' situation right now. You've got Thatcher Demko on a bargain of a $5 million cap hit until the 2025-26 NHL season through it. You've got, after this season, 3 more years of Quinn Hughes under $8 million. JT Miller, 30 years old, on an $8 million cap hit. These next 2-3 seasons are probably the most value you're going to get out of him as well. So the Canucks' window is over these next, call it 2 to 4 years. And as a result, I'm not too worried about a 2026 3rd-round pick. Whereas, let's say you do have a 2024 3rd-round pick. I mean, odds are that player probably won't be ready in time to help you anyway. But who knows, if you somehow get lucky and that prospect ends up developing ahead of schedule, maybe he can hit towards the tail end of your contention window. Whereas the player that you're drafting in 2026, by the time they actually develop and could be NHL ready, is probably 2029 or something like that, at which point the Canucks are presumably in, a totally different era potentially.
We've got people in the chat saying we've got some "We Are Gold Stars" flying around in the chat. Obviously, that phrase from Nikita Zadorov's agent. How many clients do they have now of Milstein?
Assistant GM.
Yeah, AGM Dan Milstein. Help me out here. Kuzmenko, they traded Kalynuk, which we talked about on our main show today. Somehow Wyatt Kalynuk got a mention on our main show. Who else do they have of his clients?
Mikheyev.
Kuzmenko,
Zadorov.
Not Podkolzin.
Not Podkolzin. Kravtsov was one, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if that's right. Anyways, doesn't matter. AGM Dan Milstein, obviously, yes, people are pointing out that it is a Dan Milstein client. Hashtag
Shocker.
We Are Gold Star. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah,
Grady?
just another quick tweet here. The one and only Jeff Patterson tweeting out that Zadorov played with Tyler Myers in Buffalo, Ian Cole in Colorado, and Pius Suter in Chicago. So there is some familiarity there when we start to kind of put our defensive combinations together in terms of who he's played with in the past. Just imagining a pairing of Zadorov and Myers. Whew. Couple telephone poles right there.
The Redwoods. Think of the last year with Vegas in the Stanley Cup final. How much do we hear about the Redwoods on defense, right? And Talkett spoke about them a lot, about how they have those big towering blue liners. And hey, I know I'm the Myers guy, and I always say you can't teach size, but it is true. They have gotten, it's just a matter of fact, they've gotten a huge blue liner here. Quite literally, 6'6", close to 250 pounds in Nikita Zadorov. And like you said, doesn't play like he's that big, and not in a bad way.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat this. He's got legit offensive chops. The way that when you watch him play, sometimes Calgary will have possession in the offensive zone, and Zadorov will activate. He will sometimes carry the puck down the wall. He also scored 14 goals from the blue line last year, 14, which I don't expect him to continue producing at that level. Obviously, he's only got 1 goal in 21 games so far this season, but still has 6 points in 21 games. This is a player that can chip in with a little bit of offense, which, considering his physicality, considering his positive defensive metrics, are a positive sign. One of the things that he may have to adjust to as he comes to the Canucks is a higher difficulty of matchups, because in Calgary, that blue line is loaded. It's when you have Rasmus Andersson, Mackenzie Weegar, Chris Tanev, Noah Hannafin, you're inevitably going to take on some of the softer matchups. So 2 years ago, for instance, Zadorov and Gudbranson together were arguably the best third pair in the NHL. It's what got Goodbranson paid huge bucks in Columbus.
Whew.
But it was them feasting against sort of lower of the lineup competition over the last 2 seasons.
Do you see that as a template with him and Myers potentially now kind of settling into that bottom pair? If all things considered, if they're healthy and they're not, affected too much by the injury bug.
Well, Soucy's in a similar boat, right? Because he's been a player that has typically crushed third pair minutes, but hasn't necessarily proven himself as a true talent top 4 defenseman. I would probably, I think it's a toss up. Like one of those guys is going to, when they're both healthy, one of those guys will end up taking on a role a bit higher up in the lineup, and the other will be sort of anchoring a third pair. Which, by the way, if the Canucks can get to the point where you have either a Soucy Myers third pair, for instance, or Zadorov Myers, that would be a really good NHL third pair.
Getting to the chat here, a lot of Calgary Flames fans in the chat. Our friends over at Flames Nation on the Barn Burner podcast are live right now. So if you're looking for the Flames perspective of this, go over to the Flames Nation YouTube channel. They are live right now over there. Some Calgary Flames fans are actually giving some insight into what Nikita Zadorov does. Someone pointed out earlier that he takes a lot of penalties, which you've obviously already pointed out. So you got to keep him out of the box is one thing that we're hearing from Flames fans in the chat. And there was another one here that I wanted to get to, and there's so many comments, over 700 viewers right now on the YouTube. Bananas. We've never had anything close to that high of a number. So thank you to everybody who's here. A lot of people saying it's their first time. Give it a like, give it a subscribe. Come check out the show live every day, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. My name is David Guajelli. That is Harmon Dial. Our technical producer is Grady Sass. But we're not closing out this show because I found the comment. This one from Trevor Story. No, not the shortstop. Trevor Story said this guy has a cannon of a shot.
Yeah, 14 goals last season.
14 goals last season for Nikita Zadorov. And like I said, a lot of people just joining us now. People in the chat are asking what the trade is. To refresh everybody's memory, the Vancouver Canucks have acquired left shot defenseman Nikita Zadorov from the Calgary Flames in exchange for a 2024 5th-round pick and a 2026 3rd-round pick. We said this earlier, folks, but if you're new, note that pick is for 2026. And if you watch our show tomorrow, when we're going to talk about this more, I'm sure a big topic will be something we've discussed a lot recently, Harmon, and that's when you want to be a contender and when you want to be one of these teams that stays in contention for a while, you need guys coming in on ELCs. If there's a chance you can find one of those guys in the 3rd-round pick, you look at Hunter Brustevich and what he's doing with the Kitchener Rangers right now, looking like he should have been a 1st-round talent potentially. You need all those bullets in your chamber. The Canucks kicking this down to 2026 lines up with their contention window, as you've mentioned, and it's part of a bigger conversation that you and I have had many times. Okay, anything else that you guys want to get to before we close out this emergency edition of Canucks Conversation?
I just wanted to quickly note, I know there's a lot of new people here watching. Thank you first off for joining, but if the YouTube live isn't your thing, it's also available on podcast daily. So just, find us at Canucks Conversation on your favorite podcaster app.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. Universally loved this trade, it looks like, except for the Flames fan that's in our chat. Go check out Flames Nation, man. They're giving you the Calgary perspective, but it seems like every Canucks fan is very, very happy with this trade. This will be part of the podcast, so if you're listening on the podcast, be sure to listen to our whole show today. And if you're on the YouTube live chat, you can go watch the replay of today's show on our YouTube channel, or like Grady said, you can go find it on your favorite podcast catcher app. It is called Canucks Conversation. On today's show, we broke down Patrick Allvin's win-loss record as Vancouver Canucks general manager when it comes to the trades he's made. I had him at 13-1-1. Harmon and Grady were a little bit more critical, but I think it's safe to say this is another win in that column.
Yeah, we'll see how the fit turns out. But again, the acquisition cost came in considerably lower than what I thought it could have been, especially the Canucks keeping not even a prospect, a full-time NHL player now like Niels Höglander. I'm glad that he's still on this roster, because for a while there, I was worried that Calgary in this sort of retool mode would be attracted to the idea of Höglander as a cheap plug and play option that not only has upside, but can also contribute at an NHL level today.
Some people are pointing this out in the YouTube live chat because there's Flames fans saying, guys, he's a third pairing defenseman. You should go look at who's been on the Canucks third pair for the past couple of weeks, as some Canucks fans are rightfully pointing out to the Flames fans in our chat. Thank you to the over 700 of you who joined us for this emergency edition. Remember, subscribe, like. We're live at 2 p.m. every day right here on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And you can go find us on your favorite podcatcher app at Canucks Conversation all over social media as well. Read CanucksArmy.com, all that sort of stuff. But we will close it out there. This has been a lot of fun. We were just finished our episode. Did you get in your car? Were you in your car?
Yeah, I was driving out of the parking garage and then had to do a U-turn. A bunch of people were looking at me like I was crazy. I'm like, you guys don't understand. The Canucks just traded for Nikita Zadorov.
I wish we had like a live webcam in here before the show actually hit to see Quad scrambling, myself scrambling,
man.
Harmon running back from the parkade to get in. So yeah, again, just shout out to everyone that took the time to join us here.
These trades catch me at the worst time.
Yeah.
One of them, the Hronek one, I was in the middle of actually, I was just about to start a workout. I was literally at the gym and had to sprint home because I didn't drive to the gym. A JT Miller extension on Labor Day.
They were Fridays for a while there, like the Brock Besser one on Canada Day.
The Brock Besser one on Canada Day. The Miller extension, I was literally in the middle of, like, I can vividly remember the bicep curl as I got the notification. I'm like, damn it, I have to run home
Sticking
again.
it to the evil negative media. That's what they're doing.
Okay. Well, like I said, thank you to everybody who joined us for this episode. We are going to sign off. We've done an entire podcast. There's a game tonight. We got to get home. We still have duties to do before the game actually starts. So we'll sign off for there. We'll be back right tomorrow. If you want more of this, come back tomorrow, 2 p.m. on Friday. We will be live. We'll be breaking down tonight's game between the Vancouver Canucks and the Vegas Golden Knights. And of course, we will break down this trade further. Before now, we are signing off. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Grady Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.